are now entering the horror sanctum.
All work and no podcast makes Jay a dull boy. Welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay, along with John and TJ, and we are excited to be joined by the one and only Lena Scissorhands, the scream queen and front woman of the Moldovan modern metal band, Infected Rain. Lena, thank you so much, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys, and thank you for this beautiful introduction. Wow.
Absolutely. I wrote that today. So aside from being a complete badass on stage, you are also a huge horror fan. So you're joining us today to talk about one of your favorite horror films, 1980s, The Shining.
There it is. Look
by
at how
Mr.
prepared you guys
Stanley
are.
Kubrick. Now, typically we warn you about spoilers before we talk about movies, but I mean, if you haven't seen The Shining, why are you even here? Kellen, I'm looking
Go
at you.
watch it right now.
So grab your key to room 237, run yourself a hot bath, and come with us as we slowly descend into madness. Lena, with this being your pick, you being our guest, I wanted to start with you today and just tell us why you love this film and how it's impacted you and your life.
Well, let's start with the fact that there is a lot going on around this movie, a lot. First of all, the director of the movie is a genius, right? We all know at least some of his movies because they were just so unique in their time, so different in their own time when they came out. You know, I remember Eyes Wide Shut or Clockwork Orange, I believe it's pronounced in English. Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of these movies back in the day when I lived in Moldova or in Italy. So I've seen them in different languages. That's why I sometimes don't know the exact translation. But yes, Kubrick just was always so different. And everything that is different really attracts me. And at least I want to give it a try, or at least I want to, see it. So that was how I kind of started watching his movies. Now, that being said, we all know that The Shining is based on a novel written by Stephen King, which is such a great horror novelist, I would say. I think it's what his title would be, but he writes like such diverse books, and I've read a lot of his books. Now, I never read The Shining at the time when I was introduced to this movie, so I had no idea what I'm gonna look at all. I didn't know the story. I only knew that Jack Nicholson is in this movie, and that's it. Now, when I first watched it, I remember thinking, what did I just watch? I wanted to rewatch it right away, not because I loved it so much, but because it confused me so much. As I mentioned, I did not know the story, so many things almost like were not explained. At least that's how I felt in the first view. But movies, to me, just like music, is like, it's a mystery. So often those songs or bands or albums or movies that that confused me on my first try that means that there's so much behind it. I need to rewatch it again. Like that gives me that, like, I have bands like that in the beginning I'm like, what is this? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But then the more you listen to it, the more you're like, oh my God, this is genius. Same for movies. I'm a big movie lover. I love movies as much as I love music, books, and other type of arts that show the creativity and the inner world of people behind this art. So, but let's go back to The Shining, right? So I know I wasn't the only one being confused about this movie. Even a lot of fans of Kubrick, a lot of fans of Stephen King were confused. So, that gave me some sort of like, okay, so it's not just me, I've probably seen this movie so far more than 50 times. I've seen and read a lot about the movie itself, and there are a lot of theories that are just theories because they were never confirmed by Kubrick, but there's a lot of theories that so much of personal and historical is in this movie. I don't know if you guys ever seen, there's a movie, and it's like a documentary called Room 237.
Yeah.
So that one is really good if you want to know like some ideas and some theories behind it. And I don't know how much of it is true, but it all seems true because all of them have proof of like what's in the movie, and it's super, super cool. Now, my special love for this movie actually came from the simplest acceptance when the child starts showing some abilities, and it's like the shine, right? It's this specific uniqueness of a human being that we all have, but we all have different ones, our own little I don't know, uniqueness. And in this, I loved how in this specific movie, Kubrick doesn't show this child being special needs or being freak of the society, like the majority of real people become. Like in reality, as soon as you're different, you're an exile. You're like, oh, we don't want to deal with you. You're complicated. You're different. You're this or you're that, right? In this movie, it wasn't ever like that. Like his mother and then the caretaker, I guess, of the hotel, everybody involved in the story took him serious, which is super, super awesome. And I loved that part very much, because if you take serious a specific ability or uniqueness of a person, you might develop it into something so beautiful. And I think that is the main thing that I loved right away from this movie. Now, as you can tell, I'm definitely a big fan. My favorite blanket has the same pattern. I do collect some autographed pictures from the actors from the movie. I have the twins, and I have Jack Thorsten signed picture, and I didn't take it in person. I just bought it signed on auction. But yeah, it's really awesome movie, and I think the mom, Wendy, the terror she went through in the movie itself, and then later on when I discovered the terror that Kubrick put her through, apparently pays off. It's insane. Like you can feel terror with her.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's so genuine. And I can't believe this actress got the worst actress award. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Pitiful.
Yeah.
Pitiful. Man.
Yeah. And now there's another really interesting thing about this movie that in a way fascinates me, is it's a pretty known fact that it's the least favorite movie of Stephen King. Like movie based on his novels. It's his least favorite. He like refuses to even like talk much about it or sign anything regarding that movie. But still I think it's an incredible movie full with metaphors, and it's actually not really a horror movie. It's more like a thriller based on our like existence. Like it's the society's truth that was, you know, beautifully garnished with all these metaphors in this movie, so we don't really, it's not really in your face, you know. But yeah, so I don't know, I can talk about this forever, but these are the few things that I absolutely love about The Shining, and that make The Shining special for me.
Yeah, I agree. Like a lot of, for me, it's so atmospheric. Like even from the first note in the first scene with the helicopter, like it draws you in, and we're on that trip with the family. We're on the road with them, and like it sucks you right there. And it doesn't let go for a very long time. And I watched it again this week for the first time, and I was telling TJ earlier, I think it's kind of a movie we take for granted because it's been around so long and it's always on TV. And after you watch it, I highly recommend watching Room 237 because it gives you so many different perspectives. You can even go down a rabbit hole on YouTube and find a ton of other videos. Because I also didn't realize until recently when I watched the documentary that Danny was sexually abused by his dad. And that's not something we pick up on because it's just so subtle. You know, with Kubrick and his genius IQ, like he puts all these little things in there, and like, hey, there's the, you know, dopey sticker on the wall, now it's gone. Insinuating that Danny is now awake and he's aware of what's going on. Like little things like that. The documentary was fantastic. But I'm going to pass over to John for now.
Yeah, I really agree with what you both said, honestly. I mean, I have not seen this movie a lot. It's been probably, I don't know, 20 years since I've seen it. But I know that it's right when you open, like you said, you open with the cinematography. The music is just awesome. Like I love the subtlety of it. One thing I love about this movie, though, is that every time you watch it, you can sort of, it just like a great film and what great filmmakers do, you can sort of make your own interpretation of what's really happening in the movie.
Yes.
And like this time when I watched it, I don't know if it's just being older, because when I last watched it, I was probably like early 20s, maybe a teenager. I didn't see it as a supernatural film this time. I actually watched it, and I more so saw it as just this idea of a family who has trauma, and they come to this house, and it just gets worse, and it sort of manifests worse and worse. And I don't know, it's interesting how there's so many ways you could pick it apart.
So many.
Yeah, and even like, especially what caught me was like Wendy, Shelley Duvall's character. She's so great at playing that someone who's been through the ringer with Jack, and you can tell there's a history there. And even when he starts to talk to her, when he's sitting at the typewriter, and he's like, "When you hear me typing," like, and she's just and she's so like normal about it. And that to me was kind of deliberate, because it's you realize that there's a lot that happened before this movie, like before they even got to that hotel.
Correct. And if I may interrupt you, this is also another thing that touched me pretty personal as well, because I come from a family that there was a lot of physical and mental abuse, specifically between the parents specifically. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen that patriarchy, so-called, when I do this, don't interrupt me, or do things when I tell you to. I don't like blaming people as much, because I know it's the society's real fault. Both of my parents grew up in ex-USSR countries, completely different countries, but ex-USSR countries, and the rules they grew up with are just so different. And then my father being Armenian, they have certain very old-fashioned ways when it comes to women and men, and I've seen that firsthand. So when I saw that movie, I was like, I have chills right now, guys, just talking to you about it, because I did feel it, the tension between the two people that are supposed to only have love for each other. They have a small child, they are on this vacation/work trip alone in the nature. This is so awesome. Instead, we see the tension and everything around it manifests. Definitely there's more to the story than we see.
Oh yeah, it's gotta be. I mean, it's even, I never noticed this before, but even the beginning when he's talking to Mr. Altman, he's doing the interview, and they're describing the murder of 1970, and the guy's like laughing. He's like kind of joking about it. And that was kind of interesting, because it's almost like Kubrick's like putting this hint that like anyone associated with this hotel is like going mad. Anyone here, it's like this sickness that's just going to people, like they're infected by it.
It basically brings the worst out of you. So you have it already. And if you don't, I feel like you wouldn't be a victim of this hotel. If you don't have that, like core full of anger and violence and real like negativity. But if you don't have it, you won't even like manifest. But if you have it, make sure like it's 100% gonna come out.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when you take the metaphors that are in some of the theories presented in Room 237, that film, and some of the other documentaries around that, and you realize that there's a lens to view this movie in which the hotel basically represents either America or the Western world or capitalism. You can kind of name the thing, and you can kind of see the human tragedy and drama play out through that lens, and can see so many different possible viewpoints that Kubrick could have been commenting on in the subtext. It's just masterful.
It is, absolutely. And the way I have no idea how many hours he spent just figuring out how he's gonna film certain scenes, just so he shows what he really wanted, that like, so we can read between the lines. The reason I'm saying that is because since I joined the band, I was part of a lot of music videos, and a lot of the times camera is pointed at you, right? So often, especially with music videos, when you want to deliver a specific thing, but you don't want it to be obvious, it takes a special kind of genius to know how to direct it, then how to film it, what angles, where, what has to be in the frame, and what you will show after, and in what order, and then another specific kind of genius to edit it all together just so it actually makes sense. And the reason I know is because we've been independent as a band for a very, very long time, and we've done so much by ourselves without really hiring high-level pros for it, and even now when we work with humongous teams and amazing talents, still we often put our own idea and twist into it. And my band member is specifically talented at directing and editing. He's super passionate about it, just like he's passionate about music. So I feel like I in a way was part of like this, behind the camera, like when you're in front of the lens, and like how you deliver certain things. It's not that easy.
Yeah,
no, it is not.
No. No, not at all. And the thing about this movie too, that's watching it again, that's kind of interesting, is there's so many scenes in this movie that are referenced, but then there's so many scenes that aren't in modern culture. Like it's a weird thing to say, but I found myself thinking, I'm amazed that not every frame of this movie is not a meme, because there's like something in this movie that's every frame you could use for something else. And I was like, wow, it's you always see like the same 4 to 5 clips,
Mhm.
but there's so many others that are so good that I
Mhm.
guess I've just forgotten about. But
Yeah,
yeah.
no, for sure. I specifically, one of my favorite things that Kubrick did, let's say film-wise, I guess, is the mirror effect.
Mhm.
So not just the classic red room, inversed, but also like when I tell this to people, not many people realize how many more other things go backwards in the movie. Really, many things go backwards. Like even just Danny figuring out that him walking on his own steps backwards in the maze could mislead him, and that is amazing. Like so many things like that. I love that part a lot, because what is a mirror? It's either how we see ourselves or vice versa, how we really look.
Yeah, and the opening frame of the film has
Mhm.
has the mirrored mountain scene in the water, the
Mhm.
very first scene you see, which has that kind of spiritual subtext to it of the as above, so below kind of
Yep.
thing. That basically whatever's happening on Earth is basically just mirroring what's happening in the heavens, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Energy wise, and I'm a strong believer about that. I'm not a religious person, but I like seeing the spirituality in nature, in people, even in things we do. So totally, that's totally very accurate.
And I think there's a particular reverence to nature in this film, specifically as opposed to kind of the modern Western world. And I think that's how the hotel is kind of meant to represent kind of the modern world, that we have what we've done to nature, and we try and
Mhm.
impose our will and our and industry and our structures over nature, but nature still, encompasses us all around it, and exists despite what we do to it, kind of.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. With all the storm and everything, like people not being able to even go up to that mountain to the hotel, for sure. It creates that isolation,
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, which make people only go crazier. Look, let's talk about what we've been through during COVID when we all had to isolate. What
Mhm.
happened to like many families, many individuals? Some were strong enough to be very creative and stay busy, but the majority were not. And that doesn't make somebody better than others. This is just human nature. This is just like what it is.
Yeah, and they used to call that cabin fever back in the day, when people would
Yep.
live in isolated,
Mhm.
frozen tundras and whatnot. And this just goes to show that even if your cabin is a ginormous hotel, the effects are still the same. And ultimately, in the end of this film, Jack, who went crazy the most over the course of the film, it is nature that gets the best of him, as he's lost in the maze and freezes to death.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess it's time to hand off to me. I've probably seen this film probably 2 or 3 dozen times over the years. I probably first watched it when I was 12 or something like that on cable. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, I liked that, but I also don't know if I fully, kind of like you, Lena, that didn't fully understand it. It
Uh-huh.
was almost like the first time. It wasn't quite the same effect, but similar effect the first time I watched Donnie Darko.
Same, absolutely the same.
I
Yeah,
was
I'm a big
like,
fan
I was
of
like,
Darko,
I know
so
this film is smarter than me, and I'm going to have to do a deep dive on the early days of the internet, on message
yeah,
boards and stuff, trying to figure out just what the crap I just watched.
yeah.
And very few films have made me do that. These are two that have kind of put me on a search, if you
Yeah.
will, for meaning in the film.
I love when what you hear or what you see actually challenges your inner reality, because we are talking about, we are so different. What I think about one thing can be completely different than somebody else's. So our own inner reality, like, yeah, it confuses you. Is that a good or a bad thing? Many people hate on things they don't understand. And Kubrick took such a big risk here, I think, and I know he actually was hated a lot because of this movie, included by Stephen King, because he was very upset that, you know, Kubrick did not really stay true to the novel, as true as, you know, the novel is. Obviously, we all understand that movies can be slightly, you know, different, which is fine. But yeah, I think that that movie was very underestimated. It still is by many people. Many people are like, oh, it's such a slow, long movie. Yeah, at your first thought could be that, but does it make it bad? You know, does it make it not good? Or if we don't understand it, it doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, Stephen King, like most novelists who that is their lifelong passion and career, they get very particular about being to the letter of the word, and almost very few people who aren't actively involved in producing the film adaptations of their books actually end up liking the films, because, you know, just by the nature of the mediums, you can't take a book that takes you 12 hours to read and put it in a 2-hour film.
Yeah,
there has to be some it's an art in itself to adapt source material to the film format. But I think what Stephen King got so pissed off about was there were almost like little subtle jabs that Kubrick did to say, I'm intentionally changing things that on the surface might look arbitrary, but the more we look into the genius of Kubrick and the different levels he's working on are obviously not arbitrary, like changing the name or the room number from 217 to 237. Unless you piece it into some of these different theories.
It's you
seemingly
don't even
it's like, why do that? You know?
Yeah. Or like the color of the car in the book is quite obvious that the car is red that they drive, and in the movie it's yellow. I mean, as I said, I don't think that there is any, at least that's only my opinion, I don't think that there is any kind of animosity or specifically trying to diminish Stephen King's art from the perspective of Kubrick. However, because he wanted to introduce so many personal things in this movie, I feel like maybe the right way was to say inspired by Stephen King's novel and not quite based on Stephen King's novel. So that way, maybe this, you know, little, I guess, I don't know, disliking would have not be there. But I really don't think there's anything more than that. I don't think there's anything that was done on purpose to piece each other off, you know. At least I don't think. I want to see the good in people. Who knows what the real reality is? You know, I never met or spoke with any of these two geniuses, so I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that kind of the scene that people point to and, oh, this was obviously a jab, I don't think is necessarily a jab, where he shows near the end in the ice storm the red Volkswagen Beetle that's turned over in a car accident that they see on the way back up to the hotel, was the description of the car that Jack and the family were supposed to be driving in the beginning. So you don't make it specifically the thing that was in the novel unless you were trying to make a point that you're intentionally deviating from the novel. And I think Stephen King just took that as a jab, whereas I think Kubrick is just saying that art works on a lot of levels. And I think he approached film and filmmaking and the medium of film as an artist, which is why he would never do an audio commentary or even speak very much about the context or the subtext or the meaning of anything in his films, because he wanted them to be open to interpretation. And that's kind of the genius of why so many of his films mean so many different things to so many people now,
Yes.
because they do exist in that art, because he took so many pains. I mean, he did some of the iconic scenes in this movie. He filmed over 100 takes until the actors were physically exhausted and feeling the real feelings he wanted to get out of them for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take that much pain in making every scene unless you really, I think, take every panel of film as a art piece in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't, I would not be able to say it better than you just did.
And, I think most of us have seen the terrible, more accurate adaptation of The Shining that had Steven Weber from the terrible TV show Wings back in the day.
I actually,
You haven't seen it? You should see it just to compare, because that's the one that Stephen King gives the thumbs up to.
What's the name again?
It's The Shining. It's the made for TV adaptation. By a director who we actually like, McGarris, who has done a lot of the TV Stephen King adaptations. And for what it is closer to the book. But when you compare it to the Stephen King masterpiece, it's just, there's no comparison. I love you, McGarris. I hope you come on the show someday. But I mean, it's not even comparing apples and oranges. It's like comparing a piece of fine filet mignon to Teddy Grahams. It's not even the same thing.
No, I never seen it really. Even The Shining was actually when I was a teenager. I remember only after midnight on certain movie channels. I didn't really grow up having like a lot of channels, like a lot of the cool kids. I grew up pretty poor, and it's a long story, but like I remember, like, first I've seen parts of it and I was like, what is that? And then finally, I was able, because there was no internet when I grew up. I couldn't even rent anything. We didn't even have a VCR player at the time, So when eventually I had the opportunity to watch it from the start to the end, I was already like older in my teenagehood, maybe around 15 or something, so that's pretty much it. I never, and even everything else I found out about this movie or connected to this movie was big thanks to the internet and my own research later on.
Yeah, it may be recency bias for me, since I just watched it again this week. I've probably seen it 10 times myself. But I can't think of another film that has as many memorable moments. Even behind me, the elevator of blood, the typewriter scene, the baseball bat, the here's Johnny, the carpet, the tricycle. Like, there's so many scenes that are embedded in our mind after we've watched this, and I can't really think of another film that has had that effect, which makes it, top tier. We call it God tier, up there with Halloween. Like, there's just so many scenes you can think of. There's so many scenes you can quote. Jack Nicholson's unhinged performance is just out of this world.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you've all seen
should have won an Oscar for that one, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen the video of him warming up before he did it. Where he's like pumping himself up. He has like the axe almost gets like someone on the crew.
Yep.
That's frightening right there. Like, just him doing that.
Yeah.
And I understand why Miss Duvall has degraded over time because of that film. Like, I completely understand, because like we've said, from point A to the end, it's terrifying. The only thing I would change is Kubrick deciding to do the maze scene in a studio. That still bothers me, because you can't see anyone's breath, and that just sticks out now every time I watch that. But
which scene again?
Where they do the maze scene towards the end, they're in a studio.
Yeah.
So you can't see anyone's breath.
Oh, the cold. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I've never actually noticed that.
I didn't
I've
think
seen
about
this
it
like
either.
30 times.
Now you'll notice it every time you watch it. I also wish, I completely understand Stephen King. Stephen King is the man. But I wish, and if it was my work, it might be different, but I wish you could separate the two, the book and the film, and see how beautiful the film is compared to how great his novel is too. But you know, again, I've never been in that situation, so who knows how I would feel if it was my work and someone completely changed it as well. But
yeah, who knows? Like I get sometimes some musicians doing some cover songs of vocal takes on the songs I've done, and I mean, of course it's uncomparable. It's not the same thing, but I know from my perspective, I do like it because often I'm like, this sounds actually interesting like this. You know what I mean? Like that I see why she or he tried it this way, it's interesting. When it comes to small little things about movies and small little like so-called mistakes with an object being there and then not being there, and or accidentally like the same person is doing the same thing but the scene is different, and they left it. Who knows if it's something they did intentionally or not. But when it comes to the breath not being seen in a so-called cold environment, is definitely something I've noticed in many movies, especially older ones, because it was definitely cheaper to film and more possible to film back in the day in studios than actually outside and make the actors go through all this cold. Nowadays they try to film in the environment the actor has to be. So you see it less and less in newer movies, for sure. Also, newer technologies can make it nice and cold, even if it is in a studio, But so that I think is mainly because of the year this came out.
yeah,
I think.
you're probably right.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap things up. Before we do, we like to give a rating. So out of 5, we go around and say what we would give this film. I'll go first, then we'll go with you, TJ, John, and then we'll close out. Like I said earlier, like I think it's a film we take for granted. I don't know why it's that way. Like I don't feel that way. Maybe because it hasn't been sequels after sequels after sequels besides just Dr. Sleep a few years ago. But I feel like I've always taken it for granted. So after watching it again, after watching the documentary, after watching some YouTube videos, like I think I'm going to have to give it a 5 out of 5. Like I absolutely loved it. It's beautiful. It was probably a 4 before I watched the documentary, but when you combine the two and you see so many things you would just have absolutely no fucking clue about, like it just blows your mind. So I'd give it a 5. Lena, what would you give it?
Well, obviously I'm giving it a 5 because it's just, I'm a big fan. I also, prior to the appearance of internet in our life, knew way less about this movie, but I was still very mesmerized about it. And I was giving it a strong 4 even before. It's definitely 5 out of 5 for me, for so many reasons, but just for the simplest reason that is just a one-of-a-kind movie. There's no other movies like this.
Yeah, for me, before, so I actually watched the Room 237 when it first come out on demand. I paid like $7 for it in 2012. Before I'd seen that, it was a solid 4 across the board, similar to what you guys say. But then after I saw that, and then after I went down the rabbit hole of all the other different theories and the film scholarship that has formed around this film, it's God tier. It's 5 out of 5. This film is smarter than me, and I'll never fully understand it, and that keeps you coming back.
Yeah. All right, John, are you going to break the streak?
I'm gonna have to break it a bit. So I love, this is a great movie. I've only seen it maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, but I would say that of Kubrick's films, Clockwork Orange is still my favorite. I just think there's so many things about society with that movie that is really dark and interesting. As a film overall, I would probably give it a 4.5 out of 5. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's damn near close. Cronenberg, Kubrick, Argento, they're all very interesting filmmakers in that they bring their brilliance as a filmmaker, but also like their personal trauma and history to their films. And it's a very interesting mix when you dissect their movies and you start, like you were saying earlier, like you start to figure out like what of this film is their life, what are they
Yeah.
bringing to this personally. So 4.5 out of 5. I had to break it a bit.
That's still going to average out to like 4.9, which we're just going to call it a 5. So
Yeah.
all right, that's going to do it for us here at the Overlook Hotel. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube, subscribe to wherever you're listening to us now, and go over to Facebook. We have a horror group called The Church, which is fun, that we're all in. Lena, thank you again for joining us today. You were wonderful.
Thank you.
Would you like to take some time to tell everyone where they can find you, your music, and anything else you have going on?
Well, obviously, your best friend in finding what you need is Google. But other than that, infectedrain.com, Infectedrain's YouTube channel. We all have social media, the classic social medias, and we have Patreon, where you can support and see a lot of the stuff that is never seeing the day of the light on normal social medias. So, but the best way to see or meet us is on the road at our show. So we are actually going on a very big tour now for the summer. We just announced the days, so don't miss it.
Awesome. And I'm fingers crossed for Nashville at some point in the future, because I would love to.
Yeah, we are actually working on some a separate tour for America, hopefully this year. So
Awesome.
Soon more news.
Also, I just noticed you have the dopey tattoo on your arm. Is that because of The Shining?
Actually, it's more because of the genius of the cartoon. The first, I guess, what's it called in English?
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Cartoon, like full length, like a movie that is animated.
Mhm.
It definitely touched me when I first seen it. Obviously, we all knew the fairy tale that is based on, but it was just so unique when I seen it for the first time, and that's why, And I think also, just like in The Shining, there's a special kind of genius hidden behind people that are different, and Dopey was very different in Snow White, so that's why.
Nice.
Awesome. So go check out Lena and Infected Rain, follow them, subscribe to them, worship them, all that fun stuff. That's going to do it for us. So let's figure out how we can get out of this maze real quick. I'm Jay with Lena Scissorhands from the band Infected Rain, John, TJ, and Tony. And until next time,
keep
I
it
was just about
spooky.
to sing.
I wrote that in last minute. I'm like,